the soil of India is going to be the last theater of war in this part of the world. Friends, I do not know how many of us who are going to participate in the coming battle will survive to see India free. But whether we survive or not, whether we individually live to see India free or not, we are confident that India shall be free.
हमारे सामने एक ही प्रोग्राम रहेगा, फाइटिंग प्रोग्राम, लड़ाई का इंतजाम करना, लड़ाई शुरू कर देना और कामयाब करना है। हमारे हाथ में है क्या? हमारे रास्ते में आएगी भूख, प्यार, तकलीफें, विपत्ति। कोई बात नहीं है, हम जिंदा रहेंगे या तो मरेंगे, कोई बात नहीं है। बात कोई सही बात यह है, अहम बात यह है, आखिर में हमारी कामयाबी होगी। हिंदुस्तान आजाद।
Namaskar and welcome to India's Cartoon Intro. Is history as we were taught any true? Over 70 years ago, after the end of World War II, a country was partitioned on the lines of religion. However, when the country was divided, celebrations took place in New Delhi and Karachi as Jawaharlal Nehru and Muhammad Ali Jinnah took control of two new independent states called India and Pakistan. Ever since 1947, we were taught that India won its freedom by fighting a moral, peaceful, and non-violent war against the British government. Mahatma Gandhi, who led the national struggle, was hailed as an icon of peace, truth, and non-violence. But is it all that simple? The British, who ruled India for over 2 centuries, left because Gandhi turned the other cheek? And what about Pakistan? Was its creation purely non-violent? Who were these people? What were their roles? Was freedom that India and Pakistan got in 1947 really a peaceful one? Was it really because of Gandhi? Or was there someone or something else that caused British to leave India? With me today I have Professor Kapil Kumar to answer these questions. One of India's most prominent contemporary historians, Professor Kapil Kumar has devoted his career to unearthing the authentic history of India and its people and eroding popular falsehoods. He is currently working as the historian for 5 Prime Ministers for the Prime Minister's Museum at Teen Murti House and associated as such with the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library located in Delhi. He is widely consulted for conceptualizing and developing museums by both the Government of India and the private sector for history, culture, and diaspora museums. Today he stands alone as one who has penned the content for 6 museums in India and 2 sound and light shows at the Red Fort in New Delhi. My first question to him was to ask, when did this freedom struggle begin? When did it begin in earnest? Was it in 1920 with Mahatma Gandhi? Or did it perhaps start a little earlier than that? Here again is Professor Kapil Kumar.
Okay. You see, the very first thing is that 1857 is a very turning point in Indian history. And now research has proved that it was not just a Sipahi mutiny, it was not just a kind of, local revolt by feudal leaders and all, but it was planned for a long time, 5 years and all, and it was spread right from Peshawar in the northwest regions, right up to Karnataka, in Gujarat, in northeast and all that aspects. Now, once 1857 had been suppressed by the British, they could not douse, they doused the flames. But these flames had taken a shape that they were emerging at different intervals of time in different forms against the British. Somewhere the peasant revolts were coming, somewhere, other kind of protests are there. And by 1885, I firmly believe when Hume says that a safety valve was needed, a kind of His Majesty's opposition was needed to tell the British to rule over India. And he always very clearly mentioned that he had worked in the intelligence department and he had seen reports that there were protests and all going to happen in 1857, like situation might develop. And to avoid that, he needed a safety valve. And that's how a Congress got created. And you see, one very important thing in Congress, that what were the initial demands of the Congress? The Congress demands were not for freedom. The Congress demand was not for anything major. What they demanded was share in power. That Indians should be given representation in the councils, in the legislative assembly, Indians should get representation in jobs, all these kind of demands which they were putting up. And then started a transition within the Congress. With, say, you can say that what they call the hot wing within the Congress. When this Tilak and Bal Pal Lal thing came up. When Tilak said Swaraj is my birthright, and they wanted to develop that. Now, this kind of evolution is taking place in the Congress all the time. It comes with Swadeshi movement in Bengal, when Bengal is partitioned to crush nationalism. But please remember one thing, that along with the development of Congress, there were also other streams of nationalism which emerged during this period. Don't forget that in 1870s, the revolutionaries emerged in Maharashtra. We have the Fatke brothers. In many other parts of the country, the British are being challenged by different modes. And a full revolutionary movement later develops in Bengal also. We have the Anushilan and we have the Jugantar and all. So it is not, Congress is just one stream of nationalism which is coming up against the British, and there are other streams of nationalism which are emerging during this period. And within this, you see, then we see and there are a lot of peasant movements, which are taking place all over the country against the British. And during this period comes Gandhi. And one credit I give to Gandhi is that he converts the Congress into a mass movement. By talking of the people when Champaran and all takes place, and someone says, here's someone to talk for the peasants. But we must remember here one thing which is very crucial, that though Gandhi changed the character of the Congress, from a kind of an elite organization to a mass organization, but the leadership which emerged from the masses, that leadership could not find a place in Congress organizational hierarchy.
It was still very elitist.
Yeah, it very elite. It remained with the lawyers. It remained with the top caste and all. No one found a place like Rajkumar Shukla, who had taken Gandhi to Champaran. No one find that Baba Ramchandra in Awadh, got any hierarchical position in the Congress, or what happened to Indulal Yajnik in Gujarat and all. You have many such instances all over the place. Then Gandhi comes with a thing with Swaraj in a year. And let's not forget that during the First World War, they outrightly supported the British.
But he wasn't for Swaraj, was he? He was for Dominion rule, wasn't he?
That's what I'm telling you. That the Swaraj was not even clearly defined. What does it mean? Does it mean self-rule? Does it mean dominion status? Does it mean independence? It was remained an undefined Swaraj when the slogan was given in 1920. It came out after what had happened in Jallianwala Bagh. What kind of, India thought will be divided by helping in the First World War. Some of these people had big hopes that the British are very benevolent and all. And what India got was, the Sedition Committee report, the Hunter, later on the Roanoke Act and the Black Laws and all that. And when we get Jallianwala and this massacre and all these kind of things. So there emerges this non-cooperation movement. Again, from this demand, from Swaraj in a year, it is in the late 20s, you see, that when they talk of dominion status and all at that time trying to clarify the Swaraj, where it is Subhash Chandra Bose, you see, who in the Calcutta session first time demands that it should be, complete independence. There are resolutions.
Not Pandit
Complete.
Nehru?
No, you see, it is Nehru and Subhash and Nehru who moved that resolution in Calcutta Congress. It should be complete independence.
Right.
And Gandhi is not in favor of that. And again, it takes a year at Lahore when complete independence is declared. And the interesting part is that after declaring complete independence at Lahore, Gandhi goes back, in 1931 during the roundtable conferences, you see, even that aspect. Now, again, they participate, once again, after that Swaraj experiment earlier, Swaraj Party experience, again 1937, 39, They go for electoral politics in the ministries and all which are formed. It's a massive support to the Congress at that time, which comes over. In fact, Muslim League is virtually wiped out in these elections. But again, when in 39 and all, you see the Second World War starts. And their boss is demanding, that this is the time for India, this is the opportunity for India, that the Congress leadership is dilly-dilly, they're not very clear what to do. Some want to support the British, some want to, remain neutral, some want to use the opportunity to fight the British. And that's how the Congress politics heats up during this period. If you look at 38, 39, when Bose at Haripura, is the Congress president. And again, he wins at Tripuri, 1939, which is a major victory. And Gandhi takes it personal, that it's I who have been defeated and conditions are created that Bose is not able to, even function properly as Congress president, and he resigns. And there is something very crucial which happens at this time, which is generally not very much talked in history or put in history books. That this is a time in 39 when Bose is trying for a pact with the Praja Krishak party in Bengal to check Muslim. And Gandhi agrees to that, and Bose is negotiating. And then suddenly Gandhi sends a letter, can you stop this? And Bose says this will be suicidal. Even Tagore writes to Gandhi that this will be suicidal, for Bengal.
So
But
could
they
you
don't take it.
elaborate on the Prajakrishak party in Bengal and the Muslim League? What were the problems happening at the time?
You see, it's very interesting that till 1939, or I'll say till 1945 actually, Muslim League could never make a hold in Bengal. It was the Praja Krishak party led by Fazlul Haq, and on the other side was the Congress, which were the two dominating parties over there. And most of the Muslim population, there, they were supporting the Praja Krishak party and not the Muslim League. I'll give you a very interesting incident of 1938. There's a session of All India Kisan Sabha in Komila. And Komila is basically, a Muslim majority area. And Swami Sajanand Saraswati is the president of the All India Kisan Sabha who's coming to lecture over there. And, there, Muslim League and all decide that the peasants should not go to his meeting, and they put the ayats of Quran, on the way that the people will not walk over them. And these peasants come there, they lift those up, kiss them, put them to their head, and go into that meeting, and attend that meeting. And where Sajanand Saraswati lectures, it's a very interesting lecture. He says that bread is greater than God because God is worshipped by human beings. And for the survival of human beings, bread is needed. So if no human beings will be there, there will be no one to worship God. So we have to sort of do into that, and it's big prize. So all these things which were perturbing, the Muslim League at that time, both tried to cut up this communalism, in a big way. Very few people know also that Bose also opposed at this time in 1938, when the singing of Vande Mataram was there in the assemblies by the Congress, and Muslim League opposed that. And Bose said we should not pacify communalism. The matter went up to Tagore, Nehru and Bose went to Gurudev, and the matter was discussed over there. And then it was decided, okay, we first pick up the first, thing of the Vande Mataram and leave the rest of the song. That's why the first two phrases were picked up over there. At that time, Bose was doing that. So when Bose was stopped by Gandhi in going for this kind of an alliance, Bose said it will be suicidal. Tagore wrote to Gandhi that it will be suicidal, but Gandhi didn't agree under certain pressures which were there. We have all recorded evidences for this now, letters exchanged and all that, documents which are there. And the result is that Muslim League started gaining strength in Bengal.
Was the
Then
Muslim League specifically communal?
definitely. You see, same situation look in Punjab, you see. In Punjab till 1945, Muslim League could never make a base. It was a unionist party there. Chotu Ram and all these people who were there, who were that. It's except Sindh, where the Muslim League could form its government in 1937. Even in a state like UP, the Muslim League got only 2-3 seats, in the elections, which again proved a thing that the masses there were not for separatism. The masses there were not for, the Pakistan demand, but it's the elite leadership which was leading that movement was whole pursuing this movement at that time. And that's what we see in 46, 47 when it comes up to that. Though by that time, because of certain, what should I say, wrong policies, the Congress lost, its whole support, whatever they were to take over in Bengal or they were to take over in Punjab at that time.
What were the pressures on Gandhiji that he told Netaji to stop this alliance with the Praja Krishak Party?
Well, the documentation which we have is that it's very interesting. First time I read this way back, some 30 years back, in the Padamkant Malviya's oral transcript in Nehru Museum and Library, where he made a very interesting observation in that interview. He says, Padamkant Malviya was a staunch Gandhiite, but he had joined Netaji, the forward bloc. So he told, he said that Netaji told me that Gandhiji sometimes speaks lies, And he said, I fought with Netaji that I have come and joined you for forward bloc, but this doesn't mean that I'll accept this, what you are telling me. And he said, then Netaji gave me an incident. You verify that, and you will come to know that. And he said, when I verified that incident, it turned out that Netaji was correct. The incident was this, that when Netaji was asked to form the government and then asked to withdraw. Excuse me. Now we have very interesting evidences. We have that letter which Gandhi sent to Netaji. The meeting held in Wardha, where Maulana Azad is there, where G.D. Birla is there, and it is G.D. Birla who is impressing upon Gandhi that this kind of an alliance should not be made. And then Gandhi sends that letter. And Netaji is saying that I started this whole negotiation after taking your consent only. And Gandhiji denies that. And that leads to the fall of that aspect. It had very long-term repercussions on the politics in Bengal right up to the partition period over there at that time.
Was that the reason somewhere in 71 when Bangladesh was created? I know it's a sidetrack, but
Well, you see, Sampan, the creation of Bangladesh made one thing very clear. Religion was not the factor for these artificial creations. I've been saying this even right now, you say, beyond that point. I have raised this question. Okay, then if that is the case, and if religion is that kind of a basis, then why did you kill lakhs of Muslim Bengalis in 1970s? Why do you kill Baloch Muslims now? Why do you kill Afghan Muslims now? Why do you kill Muslims in Kashmir now? And why you are silent of what's happening to Muslims in China, northwestern parts of China, what's happening over there. I've always said this aspect, and that was totally artificial, 1970-71, this 1947 partition which takes place on the basis of religion. And let me quote Maulana Azad here. Maulana Azad wrote in India Wins Freedom, where he says that our leaders had taken a decision in favor of partition, but the entire country wept over it. Don't forget that Badshah Ghaffar Khan never wanted to go with Pakistan.
he wanted to be with India.
He said that let northwestern frontier provinces be an independent state. He even went to the extent of saying that if an East Pakistan can be created, why can't a West India be created? But he's told by Gandhi that no, Pakistan is a reality. And recent discoveries have come very interesting. You see, Lionel Carter has published these 2 volumes, Ceasefire in Kashmir, where he has brought out all these military intelligence reports and the correspondence between the British officials, both India and Pakistan, between 46, 48, how these, because the army, is both British at that time, fighting, on different counts. And these reports are, hinting something very interesting, even in relation to the Kashmir issue, that how that issue immediately started. So Pakistan had its eyes on Kashmir. But a very interesting thing has come out now, that the borders of British India became the borders of Pakistan with Afghanistan. And there was a demand for Pathanistan, there was a demand for Pakhtunistan, there was a demand for Balochistan, and these tribals, whom they called Kabilis, were making those demands. And Afghanistan government of that time supported that demand. And Pakistan was topsy-turvy. If this happens there, and on that side Patel is taking action in Hyderabad and Junagadh and all, and if India moves from that side, Pakistan's existence will be nowhere. And to divert that whole thing, they gave this call of jihad, that in Kashmir there is a Hindu ruler and atrocities are being committed on Muslims. And in Patiala there is a Sikh ruler who committed all atrocities committed on Muslims. So it is a jihad and we have to save that aspect. And they transported 1 lakh Kabilis from those regions to Rawalpindi and pushed them into India. And all this happening with the British support at that time. The British knew it very well. And even very interesting documents that the Afghan government of that time, which supported the Pathanistan demand, made declarations that any Afghanistani tribal going to fight in Kashmir will not be allowed back in Afghanistan. It goes up to that time. And that's where they use the jihad plea, and which they always use. They used this when they created the Taliban aspect. It's jihad. They use it jihad even now, doing that, and at the same time, killing, as I said, Baloch Muslims and Afghans and all those aspects. But
But
these are very
Balochistan was its own independent state. I mean, in 12th of August 1947, it was a state of Kalat, right? It did get its
Balochistan.
independence from Britain.
Balochistan.
Yes.
Yeah, you see, these are even, Baltistan up there is under the Kashmir ruler and all that. And these areas are such that these areas had been always volatile. They never succumbed to the British. You see, the British had almost 3, 4 Anglo-Afghan wars were there. They could never capture Afghanistan. And and you see, it's very interesting that in 1940, when Netaji is leaving, Kabul, he has given a Kabul thesis. That letter could not reach India at that time. And in that letter, he mentions, because the initial plan was to bring the, army from the side of, with the help of Russia from Afghanistan side, and then attack the British, you see.
Hmm.
And under that, he says that how these tribals have to be organized, how these jirgas, which are all against the British, have to be organized, fight those areas and all. It's a very interesting history of this region against the British.
He also sent, remember seeing one of your videos where he said he also sent letters to Savarkarji to encourage
Oh, yes.
people to join the Indian Army, British Indian Army, and then surrender from that side.
You see, I started looking into it. That one of the charges which is made against Veer Savarkar is that he was helping the British recruitment in the Second World War. And when I looked at this Kabul thesis, there was a very interesting point among a lot of things. There are about 27 things mentioned in that, what we have to do. And one of the points says, where Netaji says, that the new army which the British are recruiting, we must put our trusted youth into that. So that when time comes, they cross over to us and they work for us. And this is what basically INA was. What was INA? INA was the British Indian Army Indian soldiers or
Hmm.
the Prawasi Indians there in Southeast Asia.
Ji.
So this is one evidence which I got. Then one thing was known earlier, that he and Savarkar had met in Ratnagiri in 1940. They had a meeting. What conspired in that meeting, no one knows, you see. And remember one thing here, that when the revolutionaries are planning or thinking, they are not declaring openly that we are going to do this and we are going to do this and we are going to do this, you see. And then what happens is that within this, when I was looking at the military intelligence reports of the INA files and the files of the INA Relief Committee, I got two letters from the INA soldiers, you see, in which this soldier is saying that on Savarkar's instructions, I had joined the INA, and the moment the opportunity came, as per no, he had joined the British Army on Savarkar's instructions, and the moment the opportunity came, as per his instructions, I joined the INA. And then this is one letter. The other letter says that many joined British Army on Barrister Savarkar saying, and then crossed over to INA. These are two very interesting evidences in that. So
These
one has to still. I've been asking the Maharashtra government to declassify the files related to Savarkar, the intelligence reports and CID reports and all that. Let's see what they do in this regard.
See, this brings up even more questions because his relations to RSS. I read a document that describes during the Noakhali movement the various works done by many RSS youth where they crossed into Noakhali, they gave aid, they gave supplies, food, clothing, lot of things, and then this is not known commonly at all. In fact,
I, I, I'll disclose to you a very interesting letter which I recently saw. And this letter has not gone public yet. This is a letter written in November 1947 by the Indian Defense Minister Baldev Singh. And the letter is written to Sardar Patel, who's the Home Minister at that time, Defense Minister to Home Minister. And in that letter, Sardar Baldev Singh is saying that there are still more than 20,000 Sikh and Hindu women abducted in West Punjab, whom we have to rescue. I can't send the army over there. So let us talk to the RSS to rescue them. And a copy of that letter is marked to our Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. It's an official letter on the pad of the defense minister.
Sardar Patel saw this message.
I tell you a lot of history, you see. I don't say rewrite history. I never use that word. What I say is history is not a dead subject. It evolves. Every day new evidences come up. So let us not close our minds by something which is said in a particular period with some political reasons. Something is said. Let's open it up. I know from my family, my first cousin in Lahore, 2 years the family didn't know where he was. My uncle and all had come here. And incidentally, this uncle of mine was posted when Netaji had crossed into Afghanistan. He was in the British Army at that time. And he was suspended later on. So his son, for 2 years, we did the story I'm told by my uncles, the family didn't know where he was. And it turned out that they had joined these groups who were saving the Hindu women over there, who were being, abducted and all over there. You look at Colonel Amrik Singh's diary. Colonel Amrik Singh was the intelligence officer of INA,
With
and who had
Pavitra Mohan Roy.
married to Bhubaneswar, Konark Coast and all, and later on, they were deceived and were given this, sorry.
He was sentenced to hang.
Hanging was ordered, and he escaped from Pavla. And there until 48 and all, he worked in those areas, and he even flew the aeroplanes to save people from these Gujranwala, these other areas over there in Pakistan. And you read his diaries also. So that is why, you see, history has to be looked in a context, it has to be looked in totality, and then it has to be understood. It cannot be done by your political, ideologies and just suppressing or distorting the facts, because you may distort, you may suppress historical facts, but the facts speak out. And today, these facts are speaking out loud.
They are. They are indeed. If we go back to 1942, I see when Gandhiji, I live in Ottawa, and there's a university right next to where I live called Carleton University. You walk down, and one of the first things that you see is a big statue of Mahatma Gandhi. When I first came to Ottawa, that was something I was always proud of. Of course, I didn't know anything back then. Now I do wonder because the credits that are given to him are Salt March, Champaran, um, the Quit India movement, and then you start dissecting everything, and you look at how much of a facts that you can look at, and you end up seeing that well, the total impact of those things on the independence was mm, it's hard to say because people were converted, people were enthused, but the effect it had on totally was negligible. So could you speak on the SALT movement and then the Quit India movement? How there was an impact, but it how did it impact the independence movement?
You see, uh, Gandhi's biggest contribution, I told you, was converting the Congress into a mass organization. And a lot depends on perceptions, you see. That how what Gandhi was is a different thing, but how people perceived Gandhi was a different thing. That makes a lot of difference when you understand mass movements, when we study freedom struggles. These works have been done, you know. Shahid Amin did on Gandhi's, you know, the making of Mahatma. I did a work on peasants' perceptions of Gandhi and his program, what led to his popularity and all that. And I'll give you one example of that. For example, in 1920, during the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi burns foreign cloth in front of Elphinstone Mills in Bombay. Now, this message goes to the countryside. And why the cloth is burnt? Because it is foreign cloth, which is a symbol of exploitation of Indians. So, what the peasants do? They go and burn the talukdar's godowns because that is a symbol of their exploitation. And if you look at Chori Chora, when the police station is burned and all. So, that is how people perceive it. And in 1942 also, there was a very interesting thing that all eyes were set on Gandhi. I've done a piece on, if you will can look, I did a piece on from ritualism to radicalism, innovative use of Vedic literature on the eve of 1942. And this is Baba Ramchandra again in UP sitting. And Gandhi gives the call on 8th August, you know, Karo Ya Maro.
Hmm.
He's writing in the first week of August, sitting in a village in Pratapgarh, where he's saying that everything is eyed on this Buddha Tapasvi, you know, what decision he will take. And then he says, this will be the last battle. But what happens in 42? First time, the Congress leadership gives a call for a movement without any proper planning and without even any guidance. Like in 1920, a program was given. This is the constructive program, you do charkha, you do this, that. There's a boycott program, you boycott the courts, you boycott the colleges, you boycott government jobs and all these things. Even 1930, a very organized program is given during the salt satyagraha. When Narsana salt, thing is, they demonstrate over there. They stand peacefully in queues, you know, they take the lathis of the police. This is the Gandhian non-violent struggle of that time. I think that's the best example of a non-violent struggle at that time. And then if someone is, you know, injured, other person takes his place. Even during these movements, it was that if the people are arrested, who will look after their families? So entire program was done. In 1942, there was no such program given by the Congress.
So
And,
how did they
and,
decide
and
to
I tell
start?
you, no, who gave the program in 1942? You look at the speeches of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from Berlin Radio,
Yes.
where he did so many things. you break their communications, you attack post offices, you stop their railways, you stop the war production, and even in that program Netaji has gone to the extent of telling the cooks, the chefs, those cooks who work for the British, they should make bad food for them. It's a total program given in these two broadcasts from Berlin, which the Indian people followed, you see, and which is one of the most massive movements of that. Even, Sumit Sarkar has pointed out one thing at that time. Giving a call at that time of a movement when the presence of British troops was maximum in India at that time. So, what was being asked for, in what sense? And we have so many other aspects. But it is the people, Sunil. It's the people who led the 42 movement. The Congress leadership were all arrested on 8th of August from Bombay evening. They were behind the bars. All top leadership of the Congress was behind the bars. It's the people who took over the movement.
So are you saying Gandhiji started this movement because Netaji said this? But what Netaji said, weren't his speeches being banned during that time, during wartime in India?
The speeches are banned and all, but that's very interesting. I have put this in the Netaji Museum. A BBC correspondent in Mumbai, he is moving around and he is going to, these shops which sell the radios. And this shopkeeper is telling him, anyone who comes to buy a radio from us, ask this whether I will be able to hear Berlin or Tokyo. That's what he says. And understand one more thing which is going on, Thousands and thousands of handwritten pamphlets. When people hear these speeches and all those, they make handwritten pamphlets out of that. They are distributed. In Punjab, the government even banned the wireless sets, you see. That people should not listen to these speeches and all those things. And these are certain aspects in history which are not told in our textbooks, you see. We don't come. Please tell me one thing. Is there any history book in the world, textbook for students, which mentions that there was only one government and one army after the Second World War, which in spite of victory of Allies and when everyone had surrendered to the Allies, that government and that army never surrendered before the Allied forces?
None.
And that was one government, Azad Hind Sarkar and Azad Hind Fauj. It was disbanded to regroup again. It didn't surrender. You see, later on, individuals might have surrendered once this disbandment had been ordered and taken place, after 17th of August. 16th, 17th of August, 45. This government never surrendered. That's a unique thing during the World War of any governments. And mind it, this government has been recognized by 11 governments in the world.
So, what still baffles me is how could Congress start a movement with no foundation, with no planning, and then you said it was a people's movement after the leaders went to jail, but how long did the movement really last?
Well, I'll tell you something very interesting. That in Satara, in Maharashtra, where a parallel government was made during this movement, it even lasts till 46, 45.
Which government was that?
There are still people revolting over there, and the British hard to control the Satara areas, in Maharashtra. See, it went up like a big wave. And unfortunately, the very Congress leadership which gave a call for this movement, after being released in 1945, they condemned the movement. They condemned the people's actions in this movement. Same thing, saying non-violence and all those aspects related to that.
They said we had nothing to do with the with the violence into the group.
It is like Udham Singh. When Udham Singh shot Dyer in London, Caxton Hall, you look at the Congressers of that time. From Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru and revolutionaries. You look at Congress stand on Jatin Das, 63-day hunger strike in Lahore jail, a purely Gandhian method. When this person martyrs himself, And Gandhi refuses to comment on that. He says, when asked to comment, you know what, I'll comment, so it's better I don't comment. Whereas Bose supports that. Bose is the one who leads when his body comes to Calcutta, who leads barefoot the procession in Calcutta and does all his rites. So these kind of things, depictions you see, and 42, Gandhi launches 42, when Bose is insisting to him in 40, 41, that please launch a movement. Don't miss this opportunity. And mind it a tactical thing. In 1939-40, when the war starts, the presence of British troops in India is much less compared to what was in 42. I have a very interesting letter in Purushottam Das Thakur papers, written by Lala Shri Ramju Ninditko. And you know what he says in that letter? The British should parade army with tanks and guns in the countryside so that the people should know that the British are very much here and they have not left this country. These are the documents which are coming out. So, 42, I personally feel the Congress should have done more homework for 42. Because once the leaders are out, inside the jails, and when he comes out in 45, out of his imprisonment, or I won't call it imprisonment, it's a kind of confinement in the Aga Khan Palace, you see, and Pune. And Gandhi is a totally changed person. You don't see that determination in Gandhi, the determination you see earlier than that. You see what he says at one time, partition will be over my dead body, and then he agrees to partition. He makes a statement that today there are fellow monarchs if I still consider myself to be a monarch in the Congress. It's so indifferent. And a very important aspect of Gandhi for this is, please remember, that Gandhi was made redundant by that very leadership of the Congress which Gandhi had created. जिसको उंगली पकड़ के गांधी ने चलना सिखाया था, that leaders, for those leaders, Gandhi becomes redundant in 46-47. You know how the partition decision is taken. How Viceroy, first talks to Nehru, then to Patel, and then only talks to Gandhi. And that is Gandhi's silent stay. Very shrewdly they take it that way. Gandhi writes on a piece of paper where they say that have I said anything against the scheme. And he agrees to partition. And that's why when you see, it's very interesting. I was being interviewed long back by a BBC correspondent who asked me about Gandhi's, 30th January, he being killed and all that. So I said, look, yes, he was physically killed that day, shot by Bartullah Godse, and no one, supports Godse's action. It's to be condemned. But before that, let me say that Gandhi had met a political death, in the sense that in Indian politics, he had become irrelevant for that very leadership whom he had created, though the people of this country always looked towards Gandhi at the time of partition. They wanted Gandhi to come out against partition, lead a movement against partition. There is an entire correspondence between Aruna Asaf Ali and Gandhi, where Aruna Asaf Ali is asking Gandhi to come and lead against the partition decision. And then she dies. that Hindus and Muslims have joined hands together. This Royal Naval Mutiny has taken place. INA was there. There are working class strikes. There are postal strikes. The peasantry is up in arms and all. And Gandhi says Hindus and Muslims have joined hands at barricades. This is violence. And then Aruna Asaf writes back that they can join hands only at barricades. So that's a very different situation, which is emerging. So this is, and then I say Gandhi committed a political suicide. But as first he said that he will not, that the partition will be over his dead body. And then he gives consent to partition when Basha Ghaffar Khan comes and asks, I don't want to go with Jinnah. I don't want to go with Pakistan. The man who had fought Pakistan and Muslim League all throughout his life. And fundamentally is told by Gandhi that Pakistan is a reality and you go and support Jinnah. And then I said even I went to that extent. Then Gandhi was physically murdered by Kotsay, which we condemn. And then I said that today, Gandhi is killed every day. Because after 47, everyone is talking Gandhi, 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 Gandhi. But what are their actions? There's a big difference between the two aspects of it.
But
And just
weren't his actions also very
I'm
impractical in running a government as well?
pardon?
Weren't his actions very impractical in terms of his views to the army, the views to industry? Weren't his ideas in that sense impractical in running of a government?
You see, let us not forget one aspect that Gandhi was not just a philosopher, but he was a practicing politician. And when you have to evaluate or assess a personality, you have to look into what his philosophy was and what his political action was. And then you come to a conclusion. I have done a paper recently, last year, I gave a lecture on. I did a SWOT analysis of Gandhi. It's a modern term, but I have easy management language. So what were the strengths of Gandhi? What proved to be the weaknesses of Gandhi? What were the opportunities that Gandhi used in the freedom struggle? And what were the opportunities that he lost in the freedom struggle? And then I talk about threats, that some of the threats that got posed to this nation as a part of these policies. Please tell me one thing. Can you isolate the violence of 46, 47 at the time of partition from the non-violent struggle as led by the Congress?
You can't.
Tell me one thing. Look at INA. Why isn't there communal discord in Azadin Fauj? How come the top officers of the Azadin Fauj are General Kiani, Shahnawaz, Malik, or Abid Hussain? All these people were the supporters. How come the Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs and everyone is together there? How come all Indians are together there saying Jai Hind? Why no difference there? Why is it comes out here in this regard or in this situation? I saw a very interesting document in the military intelligence report coming out of 1946 in Bengal, where the secretary of the Muslim League is saying, you see, when these INA trials started and people were students particularly, were protesting against that. So the student of that Islamic college also come out very strongly against these INA trials and protests against the British. And it's the secretary of the Muslim League who goes to the college who threatens those Muslim youth not to participate in these demonstrations and makes a statement that how could we have supported INA? Because had INA come to India, then where would have been our Pakistan demand? These aspects have to be looked into. Why is the Congress leadership always silent on the partition violence? What happened in Punjab? And I tell you, when Nehru went to see the refugees coming from Punjab side, No one even looked towards him. The reference we got to get is that an old woman only turned her face and asked him, काका जब ए करना सी तो फिर झूठ क्यों बोलिया? Kaka is old word used for youngsters. If you had to do this, why did you speak lies to us? And what were the lies? That these people were asked to boycott the referendum in Punjab to join Pakistan, which was being done. They were told that Punjab will never go to Pakistan. And we have cases where people had left their homes, even for a vacation, even for something, who could not never return to their houses. But no partition. So that violence of partition, it is a very much integral part of the Indian freedom struggle. It cannot be kept out of that. So those who claim, as you said, that India got independence through peaceful things. Look at this Webber's letter. 31st December 1945. See the interesting very date. 31st December is normally a day where the British celebrate, New Year Eve and all that, the holiday and all. And there is this letter Webber writing to the king there, saying that we must. Day has brought out in that book that letter very recently, where it says that we must compromise and reach an agreement, or else there might be a kind of a movement much stronger than 1942. And this is based on the information he's getting from military intelligence and chief commander in India. Okay. Where Akhil is saying that an 1857 type situation is emerging. And if we have to stay in India, we will have to reconquer India like 1857. And for this, I will need 1 lakh European soldiers. And there's a file which I saw very recently in the archives, in which file this whole argument is there going on. How do we deploy these 1 lakh soldiers? Because if we do it openly and send them from Europe, there will be hue and cry and protest in India. So the plea being suggested is that there's a war going on in Indonesia. So we use this plea that they are in transit to Indonesia and we are stationing them. That is it. There are files after file. How many people know that every fortnight the military intelligence was doing a survey of all British Indian Army units in India? Not even the active infantry or RT units, but even like their stores, people working in defense stores and supplies and all these aspects. That what is the attitude of Indians serving in the British Indian Army towards INA, trials towards INA as such, and towards the question of Indian nationality. And one of the reports says, very interestingly, it says that every Indian officer worth his salt is an at-risk. The movement of people to INA from British Indian Army, the Royal Naval mutiny, they call it mutiny, I call it the war. Royal Naval thing. And at that time when Royal Naval thing happened, there were revolts at certain places in Indian Army also, in Air Force also, which were hidden, which were not made public at that time. So all these things demonstrate, and don't forget that besides the released soldiers of Azad Hind Fauj, there are those soldiers also in the country who have been disbanded by the British after the Second World War. A trained armed force of people is there in the country. And how many people know that Azad Hind Sangh was created again in India in November 45? At many places, there are different branches with different names. Somewhere it is Azad Hind Sangh, somewhere it is Netaji Brigade, somewhere it is Congress Brigade and all that, which again shows a pattern. I am coming out to that in my book. When Netaji had said, after disbanding, that we'll meet again. This appears a pattern because the entire INA thing, which comes back to India, they go and support the Congress. They join the Congress committees. Then the struggle should move on. There's this case when the person is released from Ahmedabad jail. He goes to Patel and tells him, give me nationalist work. And Patel says, you first go and meet your family and relatives and all that. He said, no. Netaji had ordered that if we fail, the struggle must continue. And we are submitting. So there are wheels within wheels in this kind of, and such patterns which are emerging now of these links and all. The British are so worried that all the INS soldiers who have been disbanded and released, these soldiers are going out in meetings and addressing the youth in those meetings where youth are enrolling themselves as volunteers. And they go in full INA uniform. There's a full big fight in the National Archive. How to stop that? How many know that a Rani Jhansi regiment was again made in BHU at the campus of Banaras Hindu University? And the girls were joining it. So, these things of 45-47 period, with due documentation now out, we can't keep our assumptions based on the documents and all which were available there way back in 1950 or something, that this was India.
And that was the interview, guys. A more detailed look into the roots of India's partition is given in my podcast, India's Guardian Angel. In it, I have spoken in length about a concept of India as indicated by West versus the East. It also features many facets of the freedom struggle that we could not contain in that small interview. Do check out the podcast. It's available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor, and much more. The link to the podcast is given in the description box below. If you like this video, please press the like button, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to get notifications on any new upcoming content. Namaskar.